Bones must grow in length and width. This long bone, as you can see, shows what we call the epiphyseal plate. What's happening at that epiphyseal plate is interstitial cartilage growth. That interstitial refers to the fact that that growth plate is in between the epiphysis and the diaphysis. So actually the epiphyseal plate is in what we call the metaphysis. If you remember, the metaphysis is an area in between the epiphysis and diaphysis. But what's occurring there is we have depositing of cartilage that occurs at that epiphyseal plate. And as that cartilage gets deposited and formed, that bone lengthens. As the cartilage gets deposited and formed, some of that cartilage gets replaced by bone matrix. So there's ossification that occurs at this epiphyseal plate after the formation of more cartilage. Once that bone has stopped growing in length, that epiphyseal plate has become completely bone tissue. And we refer to those as epiphyseal lines. And we can see this using an x-ray. As you can see here in the upper right corner, this is actually a knee of a 3-year-old. A couple things to note. You cannot see a kneecap or patella. It hasn't formed completely yet. What you see at the distal end of the femur is this space here, as if there's almost two different bones. And in fact, often we refer to these as two separate bones until they have fused together. But this would be the epiphyseal plate found at the distal end of the femur. This is the tibia, and we see that the proximal end of the tibia also has a growth plate. So this tells us that this individual's bones are still growing. So we can determine whether bones are still growing or not by identifying epiphyseal plates as opposed to an epiphyseal line. The next method of growth is in width. This is called appositional growth. Appositional growth occurs using osteoblasts and osteoclasts on the inside versus the outside. So what we have here is this bone, this long bone, increasing its width. What happens is on the inside, we have bone being destroyed or broken down by osteoclasts. What that does is going to ultimately widen that medullary cavity. But as that occurs, we have bone being formed more on the outer portion of the bone. So what we do is we kind of break down bone matrix on the inside, build more bone on the outer edges using the osteoblasts, and this will, over time, enlarge the width, enlarge the cavity, as well as increase the width of that bone. I'll reference you to this animation. You should make a point to go to Canvas and watch this animation on bone growth and remodeling. The next thing I'd like to talk about is calcium homeostasis. This is one of the more important topics in this entire PowerPoint. It has to do with the fact that bones contain a large amount of minerals. Obviously, the most abundant mineral being calcium. And therefore, bones can act as a reservoir where if we are losing calcium levels in our bloodstream, we have somewhere to get more calcium. Why is this so important? Well, it has to do with the fact that calcium is vital to a number of body processes. It doesn't just maintain bone strength and teeth strength, but it also is involved in muscle contraction. So skeletal muscles, cardiac muscles, smooth muscles require a large amount of calcium in order for them to contract. If you lose calcium levels, these muscles have a hard time contracting. And as you can imagine, if you cannot contract your heart muscle, your heart cannot pump blood. Another vital function of calcium is in blood clotting. When we get to blood clotting in AMP2, we're going to see that you have to have a certain amount of calcium in the bloodstream in order to form adequate blood clots. Another function of calcium is in a lot of different metabolic processes or enzymatic reactions. Calcium is required for a lot of enzymes to function. So the blood has to have a certain level of calcium at all times. And if a human isn't consuming adequate amounts of calcium in their diet, the body obtains more calcium from the bones. The problem with this is over time it can extract too much calcium from the bones, and it can contribute to this process, which is osteoporosis. So notice here is an image of normal bone. Notice that this is spongy bone. Osteoporosis really affects that spongy bone much more significantly than compact bone. But if we're going to this bone and extracting calcium from it over a long period of time, it develops these little pores, and we call that osteoporosis. There's a really good animation on Canvas discussing osteoporosis again. So there's a major hormone involved in helping us increase calcium levels in the bloodstream, and it's known as parathyroid hormone. This hormone is produced by glands called parathyroid glands. These glands are found within the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland is found in your neck. It's situated just below your larynx or voice box. And we'll talk more about the thyroid when we get to the endocrine system. But inside of it is the parathyroid glands. There's actually 4 small little glands located in the thyroid. And these 4 little glands produce one hormone. So it's just named after the gland, parathyroid hormone. This parathyroid hormone is produced when your blood calcium levels drop too low. Okay, so that is the stimulus that triggers parathyroid hormone production. Okay, so looking at this path here, we see that the controlled condition is blood calcium. And if blood calcium levels drop, that triggers the parathyroid glands to turn on the parathyroid gene so we can produce more parathyroid hormone. So the home run is knowing what parathyroid hormone does. Well, the first thing it does is it's going to stimulate osteoclasts. And if you stimulate the osteoclasts will increase bone resorption. And remember what resorption of bone means. That means we break down more of the bone matrix. Breaking down more bone matrix will release calcium into the bloodstream. So that's not good for the bone, but it's good for the blood to have enough calcium. The second function of parathyroid hormone is to stimulate the production of calcitriol by the kidneys. Calcitriol is active vitamin D. And active vitamin D, or calcitriol, is going to help us absorb more calcium from our diet at the intestines. So now we will have all that calcium in our GI tract coming in. We will also be getting some calcium from our bones, and those two will maintain or help us increase our calcium levels. There's actually a third function not shown here, but it also has to do with kidneys. Parathyroid hormone is going to tell the kidneys, oh yeah, it does say it right here, to retain calcium. So the kidneys are going to do 2 things. Produce calcitriol so we can absorb more calcium from our diet, and retain calcium. Said another way, decrease the amount of calcium that might be leaving the body in urine. So 3 primary functions of this hormone. There's an antagonistic hormone, not mentioned anywhere on here, called calcitonin. Calcitonin does the opposite of parathyroid. Calcitonin, which is actually produced by the thyroid, helps lower calcium levels. Sometimes calcium levels in the blood get too high. Maybe you consumed some foods rich in calcium, and there's too much calcium in the bloodstream. Calcitonin will help lower that level of calcium in the bloodstream. So that's an extremely important topic to familiarize yourself with. Finally, I want to go over some of these tables. You can study these tables on your own, but these tables mention all the important factors that affect bone growth, that affect bone health. So this is kind of the what to do if you want nice, healthy bones. Whether it's as an adult or whether you want to make sure your children have nice, strong bones. These are all the different factors that promote bone health. The first things are all minerals, and I think we know a lot of these, like calcium and phosphorus, which are used to strengthen that bone matrix. Magnesium, fluoride, and manganese are also minerals that are very important for the bone matrix. You've probably heard of fluoride in the context of teeth, but it also is extremely important for our bones. And typically, most water supplies will have fluoride added to the water in order to promote this health of our teeth and bones. The next category are vitamins. There's a number of vitamins necessary for proper bone growth and health. And we should know kind of the difference between these vitamins. So for instance, vitamin A is needed for the osteoblast activity. So vitamin A kind of stimulates osteoblasts. So it stimulates their building of the bone matrix. If you're deficient in vitamin A, this can actually contribute to stunting bone growth. Too much of it, though, can be toxic. Vitamin C is important for bones, but a little bit of different reason. Vitamin C is more important for the synthesis of collagen. There is a lot of collagen in bone. There's about 25% of the bone is actually collagen. That collagen helps give bones flexibility. So typically when you think of a bone, you think of the calcium and phosphorus and the minerals giving that bone strength, but collagen gives that bone flexibility. So we need adequate amounts of vitamin C in our diet to promote that flexibility in the bone. If we lack vitamin C, bones can actually become brittle and can increase the chances of them fracturing. Vitamin D is important. We mentioned it on the previous slide. Vitamin D, or the active form being calcitriol, helps us absorb calcium from our GI tract. So the key here is increases absorption of calcium from our intestines, from our small intestines. And that's why you often hear vitamin D and calcium being together. I like to think of them as being married. You need both of them. They need to work together in order to maintain calcium levels. There's other vitamins like vitamin K and B12, which are necessary for protein synthesis in the bone matrix. So a lot of important minerals, a lot of important vitamins to familiarize yourself with. There is a number of hormones as well necessary for proper bone growth. HGH stands for human growth hormone. Individuals that lack human growth hormone will often have a stunted growth. There's a defect called pituitary dwarfism, where the pituitary gland doesn't produce enough human growth hormone. There's some hormones called insulin-like growth factors. There's thyroid hormone. That's extremely important as a child to promote bone growth. Thyroid hormones also help stimulate osteoblasts. So deficiency in thyroid hormones can lead to stunting of growth as well. Insulin's important. Your sex hormones are important. Sex hormones are what causes growth spurts. The estrogen in females and the testosterone in males will promote these sudden growth spurts that occur often during the teenage years. Parathyroid hormone we mentioned already. Calcitonin we mentioned already. Remember, these two are antagonistic hormones, meaning they do opposite things. Parathyroid hormone is going to help elevate calcium levels in the bloodstream, whereas calcitonin helps lower calcium levels in the bloodstream. And then finally, there are some other things like exercise. Weight-bearing exercise stimulates osteoblasts. So basically, an osteoblast will realize it needs to produce more bone matrix because the bones are getting more use. So exercise is always going to help contribute to bone health. Aging, as we age, unfortunately, things tend to slow down. Bone tends to become weaker. So we need to try to not age, but that's a little bit tricky. But as we age, some of our hormone levels will drop. Testosterone levels can drop in males. Estrogen levels will drop in a woman who enters menopause. So women who are in menopause have to be much more concerned about bone strength as younger women. And they may choose to take estrogen as a supplement, as a replacement. But that's a decision that that woman has to make. So exercise and aging. The last section of this PowerPoint goes through some common fractures that are seen. I'm not going to go through these in this lecture. I'm going to leave it up to you to just look at the name of the fracture and kind of read the description on your own and look at the picture and the x-ray and see all the different types of fractures that can occur. Whether it be in the humerus, like these two fractures, when the radius and ulna might fracture, but not completely. We call that a green stick fracture. There are impacted fractures where the bone breaks but then it's kind of forced into one another. Pott's fracture is at the distal end of the fibula. Colles fracture is at the distal end of the forearm bones, the radius. So these are just happen to be some of the more common fractures that can occur.